Welcome to the June 19th meeting of the Eugene City Council. I will be presiding today. The mayor is in New York and councilors
Taylor.
thank you,
Yeah.
are out of town. So if there is a little bit of a paucity of city councilors here today, it is no sign of disrespect to the great and important business we'll be doing today.
Thank you.
So our first order is the annual report from the Police Commission. So I would invite those members to come up and
Report.
sign in.
Enter and sign in, please.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here to do an annual report. It seems like I was just here not too long ago giving an update again, so I don't think this will be a real long update. But my name is Bill Whalen. I'm the current chair of the Police Commission for another 2 weeks. To my left is Sean Shivers, who will be the incoming chair of it. I still don't get to move off the front of the table. They made me vice chair for my last year. And then we have our other member who comes from the CRB liaison, Steve McIntyre, who will be terming out and be done at the end of this month. So, but he's happy to have him join us here at the table. So just wanted to quickly go through what we've done over the last 2 years. This is our 2-year work plan update, and then we're going to go into another 2 years going forward. Just to remind you that the Police Commission was created through ordinance back in December of 1998, and we've been in the process of reviewing policies and looking at the performance of the police department since then. Our mission statement is that we're here to recommend to the City Council, City Manager, and Eugene Police Department and the people the resources, preferred police and alternatives, policies, and citizens' responsibility needed to achieve a safe community. We strive to create a climate of mutual respect and partnership between the community and the Eugene Police Department that helps achieve safety, justice, and freedom for all people of Eugene. Quickly go through just to remind you, I know most of you have seen it. I think most of the members here today have sat on the Police Commission at one point or another or are currently on it. But our goals is to increase the communication between police and the community, leading a greater understanding of the preferred policing alternatives for the city, identify police policy and resource issues related to the preferred policing alternatives, decrease misunderstandings regarding the nature of adopted police policies, practices, and approaches, provide input on police policies and procedures that reflect community values, and assist the City Council in balancing community priorities and resources by advising on police resource issues. So in our, what we've done, we've actually accomplished quite a bit over the last 2 years. We have cleared almost all of our items that were on the work plan. The few that are remaining open are just ones that we are continuing to do more information and research on as we go through. And just wanted to point out on page, I think this is 3, just a few of the ones that, that we really, I think, added a lot of value to the department and the city. The use of force, the de-escalation policies, I think as we have all moved into the 21st policing model that was done through the study by President Barack Obama, and so that leads us towards using some of those better ways of dealing with situations than we have in the past, going along with that, moving more towards a guardian mentality than the warrior, which has been traditionally for the police departments to have. We continue to look at the professional stops policy, and at the end of, or in the beginning of 2020 is when the state is supposed to release the report on all that. We've been one of the first departments to gather that information, which is a point of pride that we should have, that we have been on the forefront of most of the issues and trying to create avenues to do policing better than a lot of the other jurisdictions in the state. Police legitimacy and procedural justice. We had a great presentation by Sergeant Smith and our own Commissioner Will Davies about that they went around and presented to the police department, to the officers, and to some other community groups about how police departments can, through their actions, can improve the their way of doing their work is beneficial to the community that they work in. So that was, and the other couple items that we worked hard on is an outreach. We spent a lot of time trying to get to different groups within the community. We have a few listed here that we've done, and we continue ongoing every month, try to get to neighborhood meetings and to make that a priority for the commissioners to get out and get in the community to get that information and bring it back to the department as we're looking at policies and procedures. And then the other one that we started recently at the end of this work plan was a homeless conversation, which was a very difficult one to actually try to get our hands around. We're not there to solve the homeless issue. We're not there to make recommendations on how the city can deal with the homeless, but it was trying to look at what the police department has and what things that they do that maybe they are being, I hate to use the word blame for, but maybe they're the ones on the front line that people are focused on, even though they're just doing what's by the law or by ordinance they're required to do. And so part of our piece on that, and that's an ongoing, that will go into the new work plan, is to look at some of the things that the police department is responsible for and look and see what policies may affect that. To give you an example, so street car camping, there is a contract the city has with St. Vincent de Paul that is sort of partially managed by the department and also managed by planning. And so we're going to look at that contract and look at, what the outcomes are expected of it, and then see where the best place and make recommendations to the department and to the city and maybe even the council about how that contract should be monitored or adjusted if that's the need for it. Because I think the program itself is a really great program. I think it just may need to have some tweaks as we look through it. Because we've had a lot of people talk at our public sessions in our meeting about some of that when people are parked in front of their house with an RV and if they feel safe or if they don't feel safe and what happens when they do call the police for it. So that's more of our direction that we're looking. We're not trying to tackle the homeless problem at all with that. So then with that, I would be happy to move into the 2019-20 work plan. As you can see in our last two pages, we have our top 15 items that we're going to work on. We do always try to leave a little bit of leeway in the work plan for things that come up, either brought up from the city council or from the department or from the community itself to put into our work plan. But we kind of ordered them in how we voted on them at our planning session in May. And so outreach to police officers, we found through a lot of surveys and things in the past that a lot of the rank and file officers and employees don't really understand what the police commission does or how it affects their job. And so we're going to try to do a little more outreach with that and trying to get that. And the other couple ones that I think are going to rise to the top, the interagency deadly force investigation team protocol. That was one that Chief Skinner asked us to add to our work plan. Even though that's sort of controlled by the district attorney, that he wants us to look at it and see, because as we've been through some critical incidents in the city, that release of information has been difficult, trying to get it out in a timely fashion when there's a lot of people saying we can't release. And so we want to look at that and maybe try to make recommendations to the department, to the city manager, maybe to go forward to that interagency group and talk to them about releasing some information in different ways or at different timing. We also have that to look at our own policies on when we release information, especially on critical incidents. There's been a lot of other police departments throughout the nation that have adopted some very good policies, I think, and procedures where they get out within a 30-day period on critical incidences and release body cams, tell the story up to the point that they know And then you could see, and a lot of them are done through video, so they're out there. So people can watch a video and watch all of this, and it explains, it doesn't give you was it right or wrong, it just gives you the information out there. So I think some of those things we need to look at going forward. And then just a few other things that supervisor accountability. We're also looking at the training and evaluation of supervisors for the department because we rely a lot on the supervisors on the conduct of the patrol officers and doing that. And so with that, and the other item we'd love to look at, and hopefully if the enhanced funding goes through and continues on, that maybe we could look at a Citizens Police Academy coming back, because I think that had a lot of value in having people in our community understand how the police department works. With that, I will open it to questions or comments from.
Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going back over the report and going back to item 18, outreach to minority communities, and I note that other than transponder, there's a marking down there that says unknown. First Friday's a color group, and I often participate in that group by virtue of both being a city councilor and, my role at Lane Community College. And I was wondering, what is your plan in terms of outreach to communities of color for this next year coming up? Because it doesn't seem to be as active as I think we would like it to be from the police commission standpoint.
No, I agree with you. I think we have a lot to work on with some of that getting out there. And so what we've created is we have a spreadsheet kind of database piece where we've listed out all of the community, the regular community meetings that are out there for all the various groups, and we're trying to add ones as we find out about them. And so then we're trying to get commissioners to sign up on a monthly basis. So every month we talk about who's gone to what meetings and do that. And so, but we're trying to make it a focus to get to all the meetings that are on our list. And there's probably, I want to say 30 meetings that are on that list. Not all of them are every month, but it's about 30 groups that we're trying to get to.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there a Human Rights Commission representative on the police commission?
There is.
Okay, so there should be some interactive ways of engaging, those communities through your Human Rights Commission representative, as well as this, not just laying it on that representative, but also being responsible as a total body for that interaction.
Yes. Sean, did you have something?
Can I speak up as well? As the incoming chair, one of the things that I've noticed is it's difficult to find contact information for a lot of groups that we aren't personally connected with. So I'm hoping to rely on our new members and some existing community contacts to start with increasing that list of contacts to then assign people more efficiently. And I will personally show up if you send me an invite.
I think the Human Rights Commission staff has a whole list of those groups and organizations and who meets when and where. First Fridays of Colors, pretty easy to find. It's the first Friday of each month, except for a couple months in the summer, and it's always held at the Campbell Senior Center. So there are some clear opportunities to engage.
No, thank you. And I will mention one thing that we do usually try to call the groups because there are some groups within our community that having a representative from the police commission or any representative that's coming from the police, that is very difficult for their group for us to be there. And I'll mention the transponder was one of those that we met with a couple of their leaders, and they specifically asked us not to come to a meeting until they could work with their community group, because there is the sad part, there is a lot of fear, and so we're trying to break down that. So we do understand that with some of our groups we have to kind of work our way into those, and we're trying to do that as best we can.
Claire.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the update on your work plan and for your volunteer work on the Police Commission. I really appreciate it. I had a question about in your last year's work plan, one of the things that you wanted to improve is your, to develop a stronger relationship between the commission and the city manager and the council. And I'm just curious, I mean, it says that there was quarterly meetings set up with us, but also, or I'm assuming that's with us, but also with the city manager. And I just was wondering how that had been going.
So I would say we haven't met every quarter with the city manager. We've kind of met when we felt there was a need, and I think we met probably 2, maybe 3 times in the last 12 months. But that's more of, instead of taking up both of our times just to have a meeting, we try to do that. But I think that was really good. I think it got us more involved in some other issues that the city manager had. And so, but I think that was a really nice communication piece to open up there.
And it has created an environment where you, the chairs, feel comfortable reaching out to the city manager and vice versa. Great, that's great to hear. And then just a little note on the priorities for the next 2 years. The number 2 priority that weighted there on the list was the camping policy and litter, which I completely understand why that's on your list. I would just point out that, you know, my experiences, particularly during the summer months, we do see a lot of groups on the river who leave behind a lot of litter who are not necessarily homeless folks. And now I'm sure our Parks Department is aware of that and deals with that, but I don't always want the idea of groups of people who are messy to always be assumed that it's because they're homeless, because sometimes we just have really inconsiderate people who come down and use our public spaces.
Alan?
Yeah, I'm the new guy on the police commission for the council. I replaced Claire a little while ago, so it's been a pleasure to be on it, learned a heck of a lot. I wanted to thank Bill Whalen for being the chair for the last 2 years. He's done a fabulous job, but he's termed out by the rules, and good luck to Sean. He'll do a fine job. And then I wanted to also, Steve McIntyre is also terming off. He's with the CRB, and he'll be leaving the police commission as well, but we'll have a bunch of new people. So thanks for your work over the years, too. I did want to point out a couple of things. The Interagency Deadly Task Force investigation team, IDFIT, that one in particular, the chief wanted us to look at because he in particular, and I think most of the community was frustrated with the recent deadly force incident that we had that was unfortunate but justified in the pace that information came out. We had people come to council talking about stuff that wasn't even close to true, and the faster we can get that information out, and other communities have done that. So one of the things we'll be looking at is being able to do that and get out information like body cam cameras and such like that to, and quicker, faster information to stem some of that instant reaction that might not have any basis in truth. The other 2 things, Claire mentioned it, is the camping. The police department is rightfully frustrated in that they have, and they're in a very tough position where they give citations to people and then they just keep giving citations to people and there's nothing that really happens. They don't get paid and nothing really happens. It's just, it ends up being a blot on that homeless person's record if they were ever trying to get to stability, but it also is very ineffective. And so maybe the council needs to think about better ways of dealing with that. And of course, getting more housing and shelter is a better way to do that. So, but that takes a long time. But they're in a tough position, and maybe there's a way we can think about that as a council. And then the other one is the real, a lot of these higher prioritized items are on the outreach from the commission to, we want to have police officers come in and talk to us so we can get more experience with that and have a 2-way dialogue, but also a diversity, equity, and inclusion presenter several times a year to be able to get more in tune with that. And then also the community and what's happening there. So going out to different neighborhoods or parts of the city and holding meetings is, I think, a really good idea. The Police Commission, to my knowledge, hasn't done that before, so that'll be a good effort on our part, and then to publicize it and have that work will actually allow us to get out to the communities more and hear what they have to say as well.
Great, great. I guess the only thing I would add, and I agree, one of the ways we've tried to mitigate handing out citations that result in fines that can't be paid is to hand out citations that result in going to community court, where when you go to the community court, your sentence is to go to the next room and receive help as opposed to a fine. And I think right now the system's only applied in downtown and for only certain misdemeanors, which means it can't reach a large number of people who could otherwise perhaps benefit from a solution other than a fine they can't pay. So looking at that as being a part of maybe what the solution would be. The other point I would mention is when I look at your work plan, one of the things that's critical for me is the notion of how the police department can reflect greater responsiveness. And we talked around this in the community safety conversation, but the police commission, since it's made up of civilians, is an interface between the public and the police department. And so on your work plan, when I look at particularly number 5, outreach to neighborhoods, and number 12, spill over into neighborhoods, these are opportunities where the police commission can assist in that whole notion of responsiveness, which I think is a word that keeps coming up over and over again. How can the police department demonstrate increased responsiveness to the needs of the people in the community who live in neighborhoods? And so I would say you can provide a critical interface and role in that entire effort to try to push what the police department does out into the neighborhoods for the benefit of the neighborhoods and increase responsiveness. So I would encourage you to take a really strong position on at least those two in addition to all the others, because you could provide a critical role in helping us to be more responsive within the neighborhoods.
The interagency deadly force investigation team, I think, also goes to the heart of that, transparency and responsiveness.
Perfect. That would be perfect.
One other tidbit.
Other?
For those that don't know, might be watching on television, all of the meetings that the police commission has are at the police department, which sometimes can be intimidating for people. So the effort to try to get out into the neighborhoods and have alternative locations where we do our meetings may make those meetings more accessible to people.
Yeah, could help. Thank you very much for coming today. We really appreciate the presentation, and I'm excited about your work plan. I think it's great. Thank you, Bill, for all the great work you've done, and I really look forward to new leadership and exciting new progress.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Bill's still going to be the vice chair. So he's not off the hook.
You're not off the hook entirely.
Get off the front of the table yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our next presentation, we will be hearing from the Civilian Review Board and the Police Auditor Annual Report. You get to stay here.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Steve McIntyre. I'm the outgoing chairperson of the Civilian Review Board. I'm not sure how long I've been on the Civilian Review Board. I know it's been a number of years, but I will tell you that I'm really appreciative of your support and for appointing me to that board. I really found this board to be very meaningful to the community, and I'm very grateful for my time on the board, so thank you very much. I'm here to deliver the annual board report. Eugene's Civilian Review Board is designed to provide transparency and help ensure public confidence in the police complaint process. The board evaluates the work of the independent police auditor and reviews complaints to provide a community perspective about whether complaints are handled fairly and with due diligence. The annual report contains a summary of the work that the Civilian Review Board undertook in 2018, and that should be in your packet. We appreciate the support of the mayor, city council, and the police auditor over this past year, and I cannot personally thank you all enough for having the courage to establish the CRB. In my several years of service on this board, I've seen great change and improved transparency and relationships. I thank you for that. I think the community also thanks you for that. Included in the report are many trainings and cases that were reviewed over this past year. I do not want to duplicate the effort of this report by reporting what's in the report. Instead, I will give you all your time back unless there are questions that you'd like to ask of me. So thank you.
Are there any questions? Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. One of the things I noticed, and thank you for that concise report. That's awesome. Thank you. We need more concise reports. The complaint trends. Can you tell me, from your perspective, why that trend is heading in the direction that it is?
In part, and Mark and Leah can supplement this, but
Right.
I think that getting the information out to the community that this process is available, like marketing campaign, is part of that, a great part of that. I think bringing Beatrice on, so being able to reach out to other communities, I wouldn't necessarily read into it that it's a bad thing. I think it's a healthy thing that it's working, because you'll note that many of those complaints are internally generated, which I think is a good thing. So there's kind of trust and faith in the process, and like confidence that they'll be heard and addressed appropriately. So there's a number of factors, but I actually see them all as good.
Thank you. I typically get to ask the auditor such questions, but I wanted to hear the communities, folks who are involved in that.
Sure.
Perspective too. So thank you for that.
Alan?
Yeah, there's going to be quite a bit of turnover on the CRB. You're going to have to retrain everybody. But I did want to point out the format that this report comes in and the importance of it. One of the big chunk of the report is actually the review of the cases that go before the CRB. Yes. And I mean, Steve, you can address that, but I think that goes directly towards the transparency. For those of you watching on TV or want to know what the CRB does or have a particular interest in a case, there's the summary of the facts and a little bit about the deliberations that they do at the CRB, but then also how it gets resolved. And so, and the issues that the CRB feels are relevant with this particular, that particular case. So it's great text for people to figure out what's going on if you're ever interested in or have an issue with one of the things, an incident with the police, then this is that the CRB ends up taking up. They don't take up everything, but the significant ones they do, where there's a complaint. So maybe you can address that a little bit more too, Steve.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I would like to just point out that these cases are not softballs. They're not meant to be, there's no question about it. You can gather from the responses and the dialogue that we don't always agree, which I think is a good thing because the community does not always agree. And so while the CRB does have a purview of the case files, the videos, all the information that's got a protected status, you can see some of that drip out here in what gets reported to the community and the transparency of this annual report. The intention is to kind of give a flavor to the community of some of the issues we're addressing, which, by the way, finds its way oftentimes to the police commission and help influences policies. And that's why we kind of pick things that may have ambiguities, may be a trap in terms of policies. Can we help influence and shape those to make them easier, but also inform the community we're actually, it's meaningful work that is designed to help move our community forward. So that's exactly why we want to provide as much transparency as we can. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. The difference between the police commission and the civilian review board, they do completely different functions. Some people say, why do we even have a police commission if we have a CRB? CRB only deals with the complaint part of it, but they do make recommendations that could go over to the police commission, which deals with the policy and the procedures. And so it's a little mundane a lot of the times that I've found that we end up going over, the detailed policies of the police department line by line, and some of them haven't been reviewed in years, and we're working our way through all of those. But that's an important function that's completely distinct and separate from the CRB, and I think a very necessary function to add transparency to what the police department does in terms of policy and procedures for the police commission and how the complaints get resolved for the CRB. very different functions, both very necessary. I think, and it would be a really bad idea to combine those two things.
Yes.
As anybody who sits on either of those bodies would attest to, I think.
Yeah. The part I would probably add is, I was here when we put this up for a vote and we put it on the charter. And I think one of the greatest strengths of the entire proposal was, in addition to having a police auditor, you had a civilian review commission. And I think it's the two of those together that create the strongest way to deal with this entire issue. It creates more sets of eyes to look at an issue. And I am very skeptical of any system of auditing that only has one set of eyes looking at things, because you can't necessarily get the benefit or the transparency that comes from having a multi-part system. So I think that's what's been the great strength here. So that means that we have an auditor who performs an extremely important function and a civilian review board that also performs an extremely important function. Just as Alan says, it's not the same as the police commission. It's a different function, but it's a critical one. And when I look at the information, I try to look at it from the long-term view, not just from 1 year, but for actually a series of years, because you're looking for the culture change that comes as a result of the work you do. And I think that is really beginning to demonstrate itself, that you talk about internally generated issues and complaints. That's one of those culture changes you're looking for, where it's not the police department in a bunker protecting itself from some angry public. It's the dynamic where the police department becomes its own positive culture for change. And I think that's really what, at least I was looking for when we created this in the first place. And so I have to thank you and the auditor both for helping us to achieve that culture in cooperation with the police department. It couldn't be done without the police department, and I think it's a real benefit that you and the auditor have both worked very hard to create a positive relationship with the police department. And it's only through that kind of interactive relationship that we can also make this work. And it's not rubber stamping and agreeing. It's agreeing to disagree oftentimes, but doing it in a way that produces a positive outcome. So I congratulate you not just on this year's work, but all of the year's work that both the auditor and the Civilian Review Board have accomplished. You're both critical parts of the success, and I think that's worthy of great respect and praise.
I was a great comment. Just one a follow-up on that is the way you guys design the Civilian Review Board is really helpful. It's meant to be a representation of the community, but also there's a sense of independence. While the auditor is independent, I can assure you the board is also independent and has not always aligned up with the auditor or with command staff. And so I think that's a great feature of the Civilian Review Board, so thank you.
That's how it works.
It's supposed to work.
Any other comments? You know, it's a mark that when you do such a good job that nobody can go, oh, I think I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this. I think the overall is that you're doing such a great job and achieving such great outcomes that we go, good job, keep doing the great stuff, and thank you so much for the work you do.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it. I believe that is everything on our agenda for today. Leah, did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I think Mark.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
We have a whole report.
We have a whole nother
Our
report.
too.
And a presentation.
And if
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off, but
My mistake.
Steve very humbly said that things make their way to the police commission from the CRB, and the way they make their way is through Steve.
Yeah.
And he's done a wonderful job of that.
Great, thanks for reminding me of that.
I think it's been 9 years. I'm Mark Gissner for our viewers all over the world. To my right, or to my left is Leah Pitcher, Deputy Police Auditor. To my right is Beatrice Hernandez, our Community Engagement Coordinator and Translation Specialist. I got it right that time. And then in back is Vicky Cox, who really is the transmission of the office in terms of making sure everything runs very, very well. I want to thank the counselors for taking the time out of your important days to indulge us here as we give our annual report. Couldn't go on without really thanking the 3 staff people I have. They're truly 3 of the most outstanding people I've ever had the opportunity to work with, and very blessed to inherit Vicky when I came there, and then Leah came on, and she's been with us about since, 10 years, November of 2010. And Beatrice, over 3 years now, right?
It'll be 3 years in August.
Okay, so I know it was just, it went so fast. Certainly appreciate the Civilian Review Board, as Mr. McIntyre said, who I think served for about 9 years. They really do bring an independent view to things, and we do difficult cases, and no one has brought more issues to the Police Commission than Steve has, and certainly his fingerprints are all over that new code of conduct that just came out fairly recently. So really want to thank his work. As you know, it's about a year into Chief Skinner's term. When I came here, Pete Kearns was part of the Old Testament, if you will, because he was there when the ordinance was written and the charter was written and all those kinds of things. Chief Skinner sort of just stepped into the New Testament, and it was a situation that he had never worked under before or anything like that. So we had some interesting discussions about how we work together. You know the chief as well as I do, and brings a lot of energy to the table. And I think that we've found a synergy where we bring forth our issues. I'm pleased to hear, and when he first got here, I started talking about the IDFID issues. I'm very pleased. As you all know, I've been, since the day I got here, passionate about offering suggestions for improvement. I think that's diplomatic. And so I'm glad that the Police Commission is also going to look into that. And just a nugget out of that is the investment in the body-worn cameras, I think, spoke for themselves on that particular issue. And I know there was a little bit of cost worry when the body-worn camera was going to be introduced. But I think that they've proved to be extraordinarily valuable for us as well. As we move forward, I'm certain that we're going to set a new record for the number of complaints that we have. It's impacted us significantly. We had never anticipated to be at this particular level, so don't really have time to get a newsletter out, and then June's kind of with all these reports and things like that, getting those out. So it's had an impact. And I still think, to address maybe your question with Mr. McIntyre, I think there's still room for improvement in the areas of customer service, especially first-line customer service, and being honest with people at that first line of customer service about what you can and what you can't do, as opposed to, well, if you don't like it, just call the auditor's office, you know. And so I know that Chief Skinner is committed to improving customer service at that first line so it doesn't trickle down to our office and supervisors and everyone else. So I'm certain that we'll get those accomplished. With that, I think, other than, again, we came in under budget. We're going to return about $34,000 again to our budget this year. And I even had several people say, "Well, you should spend that." It's like, no, it's my money too, as a taxpayer. And so if we don't need it, we're not going to spend it. And I think that we've been judicious about that for the time that I've been here. So I'm going to turn this over to Leah, who did most of the heavy lifting on the annual report, as well as Vicki and Beatrice, because again, I got great staff, and I like to take the opportunity to use their valuable tools. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Mark asked Beatrice to put together some stuff on, we also did a public safety forum actually last month in May. Timing didn't work out to do one in 2018, so it's not in your 2018 annual report. However, since we're here, I know we had a really great turnout. I'll let Beatrice talk about it more. But we wanted to just give you a quick overview of that before we launch into the kind of, well, the statistics, 'cause they're just not that fun. Okay, you go.
Okay, thank you. So let's get started on the outreach that we have done in so these are 2018 outreach events that we have participated in. We continue to table at many local events in the area. We did the International Human Rights Day last year. We also did the Posada Navideña, which is a fairly large event that takes place in December between Centro Latino, Huerto de la Familia, and Downtown Languages. We also were at the Lane Arts Council Fiesta Cultural kickoff. We tabled with the Human Rights Office and EPD. We shared a table at that. It was a very large event in downtown Eugene, so it was a great opportunity to connect with the community. Mark was also a speaker at the Eugene City Club Spotlight conversations that the Eugene City Club is having. So they were gracious enough to have us there, and Mark was able to answer questions from the Eugene City Club and the community. I also presented at the Lane Community College English as a Second Language course that they hold. It was a good opportunity to present in English and Spanish so that the people in the course were able to practice their English skills and also learn a little about what our office does. We also continue to assist neighborhood association meetings. I think we attended around 7 last year, which is a pretty good number considering they don't meet on a monthly basis. We continue to do trainings, and Mark and Leah continue to attend conferences so that we stay up to date with best practices. And of course, we have the recurring meetings such as the Police Commission, HRC, and Mark meets with you counselors and the mayor on a monthly basis. So,
What I'll say is probably the outreach is 5 to 10-fold where we actually get in to meet. Most people aren't really that interested in our office unless they're individually impacted in a very negative way. We don't certainly live in areas where there's like a task force operating in a particular neighborhood and stop and frisking everyone and things like that. Most people in the community want the police at their community meetings to talk about the crimes and things that are going on. So again, shout out to Beatrice for, we really do try to reach out to a lot of different areas, and that's the results of our reach out, but in fact, probably 5 to 10-fold has been more outreach to try to get in, to insert ourselves into their systems.
yeah, so like Leah mentioned, this isn't 2018, but I wanted to take a very brief moment to let you guys know how our public safety forum went. I wanted to thank the mayor for being in attendance, and she made welcoming remarks in Spanish to everybody before the forum started. This is the second year that we hold this forum. We held it at Prairie Mountain School in the Bethel School District. We had around 100 people in attendance, which is around the same number of people that attended the previous year, but the school district is a third of the size, so we thought that was still a pretty good turnout considering the significant smaller size of the school district. The organizations that participated, these are just a few pictures that I was able to catch. As you can see, we had social services organizations. We also had government services on the, so the first hour was for tabling. So all of these organizations had their own table, and people arrived, grabbed food, and gathered information from all of these organizations that were tabling. During the second hour, we transitioned to a Q&A session, which is where we had 7 different organizations and departments answering questions directly from the public. And that panel was the chief. We also had emergency, Eugene Springfield Fire. We had our office, the Human Rights Office, Centro Latino, GLAD, and I believe I'm forgetting one more person, but the goal was to include both government departments and social services agencies so that we could bridge that gap and make connections between the services that we all offer the community. The questions were great. We had...
I was just going to, if I may interject, and it's so important to have those social service agencies there because they're the first line contact for many people who do not understand government and social services. And if we can bridge them with them having confidence in public safety services and being knowledgeable about the services provided by public safety, then that makes it easier for them to understand the things that government does and then for government to understand the sort of clientele that they might get that might feed into the government system. So Beatrice worked really hard to get a lot of organizations tabled for that kind of thing. Women's Space is a perfect example, again, of building that bridge from the community member to the first line community organization to public safety.
Thank you, Mark. So the types of questions that we had usually always revolved around EPD whenever EPD is in the room. So our moderator for the event did a very good job of sort of juggling the questions so that not every question was directly just to EPD and that the other panel members felt left out. But some of the examples of the questions that we received were, if my house burns down, who do I contact for paperwork needed for my home insurance? Somebody asked if they could contact the fire department directly and what that process was, or if they had to go through EPD. People obviously wanted to know how diverse EPD was, and they asked about how many officers speak Spanish, what the process is if EPD responds to a call and nobody can speak English, what the process is after that. And can a person without documentation submit a complaint against an officer was a very important question that we received. There's obviously still that fear about repercussions if somebody doesn't have proper documentation, and we want to make it clear that anybody can seek not only EPD services, but also can contact our office about any questions regarding EPD. So those are just a few sample questions that were asked at the event. And again, I want to thank Mark for providing me the opportunity to plan events like these. And we're already working on scheduling our next forum. We are hoping to start holding them twice a year and trying to diversify the location so that we make sure that we catch everybody in the community. So thank you.
Thank you. We could go into statistics, or if you have questions about that, we could.
Anyone have questions for Beatrice? Great, thank you.
Yay. I get the most exciting part, I think. I apologize, sorry. So in 2018, we did have 392 complaints, which was a 20% increase over the past year. 355 of those were from the community, which is as opposed to an internally received complaint. 21 allegations of misconduct, which is about even from the previous year, but a big increase in inquiries and service complaints. I did an average of our like past 8 years since Mark and I have both been here, and it was usually about 370, and so we are well ahead of that. And then based on how many complaints we'd received as of yesterday, we should get about 470 this year, which obviously would be another significant increase. This is kind of a messy graph, I apologize, but so when something's classified as an allegation of misconduct, there may be several alleged policy violations within that one complaint. So in those 21 allegations of misconduct, 3 allegations of criminal conduct, that included 48 specific policy violation allegations involving 23 employees. 56% of those were sustained, and then these are the areas that were sustained. I think part of the reason it's kind of a mess is because the code of conduct did change partway through the year, so some of them got classified as a different title than maybe it would have been previously. I tried to merge those to the extent it was reasonable, so it didn't look so messy, but I apologize. This is the discipline. So this is not saying that necessarily, 12 employees got an oral reprimand or that 3 employees resigned prior to termination. It's just that it was actually in that case, it was one employee had 3 sustained allegations and they resigned prior to termination. So, but those are the types of discipline that were involved. The way our office is set up, we do not have input into the disciplinary actions, but we do observe and report. That's a term. Never mind. Sorry. We make reports on things. Here are service complaints. They are largely related to performance and courtesy. Service level was an increase this year. And service level complaints are those that are an incident happened, nobody showed up, it took 4 hours for them to show up, along those lines, or they showed up but didn't take a report. So that was a much bigger piece of the pie than it has been previously. And that's the last one. So if you guys, and at the end of the annual report, we do include every single complaint that we got in the last year. So if you have questions about any of those, we can try to remember them.
And I was going to, we also, there's about 200 reportable uses of force that come into it's called Blue Team software system. And so we review each one of those. supervisor has to write a report. And then I would say this year, more than any other year, we've just watched a lot of film from the body-worn cameras. So we're devoting an awful lot of time, Leah or I, or both, watching film, both on the use of force and also anytime there's a complaint of discrimination or racial profiling, there has to be a report generated by the supervisor, has to respond. There has to be a report generated in Blue Team, has to be reported to the state. And then, again, we review those cases as well. And Beatrice and I are finalizing a report on the complaints over the last 2 years. Obviously, not everyone complains about it. But again, in each case, we look at each individual case, whether an officer had discretion in any particular case, and so we'll be bringing that forward. But I suppose the body-worn cameras have been both a blessing and a curse because they've generated significantly more work, but at the same time, they allow us to triage complaints, whether internal or external, particularly citizen complaints. And so that's been helpful in terms of then reducing whether we push something forward or not. Again, we still, sometimes things happen that if we don't hear from a member of the community, we're not going to know about it and we're not going to be able to investigate. And a lot of those, I think, or I shouldn't say a lot, it's never a lot. Several of those involved whether or not officers handled calls for service in which there might have been some level of domestic violence in the home. And if we don't hear about those, a lot of times those go unreported, and those have been some of our most difficult cases. Finally, just once or twice again, I'm still hoping that we will get out of the arena of respectful workplace type cases. We've had to house a few of those again this year because the process has not met my expectations, and therefore, whether it's an employee or a member of the community, the ordinance allows employees to complain, and so to ensure that those are done in the way that meet my expectations, we've had to house one or two of those cases, and again, hopefully, I know they're going to bring a new person on in HR that's going to deal with those things, and so we look forward to not having to house those someday.
Great. Claire.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing your great staff with you to your annual report. So first, I do want to thank you for sharing about the Public Safety Forum, even though it's technically not from your report from last year. It sounds like it was a very successful event, and I really appreciate the efforts that you put into putting it together and bringing the social service agencies there and having, a skilled moderator and all the things that went into that. Putting on an event like that is not a small task, but I think it has huge benefits that ripple out in ways that are difficult to quantify. So thank you. And then, Mark, I noticed in your summary, in your report, that the police chief has invited the auditor's office to speak with new recruits. Has that started yet? Do we have new recruits yet that you've had a chance to meet with?
First time, couple weeks ago, and I had a good conversation, and we talked about just sort of the things that we see that often get them into trouble. And again, oftentimes it starts at that customer service level, and treating people with respect and dignity and not losing your temper, because I think day to day they lose the appreciation of the power that they have. That as an individual, they can take away our freedoms, they have the power to take life, they have the power to use force against us. No one else in our nation, including our military, not counting Kent State, can use that level of force against people in our community. And so for that, they need to have that appreciation. And I think they just sometimes see their job as a job and forget that they have that level of power, and with that comes great responsibility. So it was the first time we'd ever done it, and I think it went really well, and hopefully maybe some of the message that we ask of them translates into how they deal with people.
We also, sorry, to that point, we also participated in a Sergeant's Academy last year. There's been sort of a mass hiring and also mass promotions happening. So there's not always a Sergeant's Academy, but when it did happen last year, we were involved in that.
Great, that's excellent. I mean, I think that's a great example of the kind of collaboration that I think this council wants to see between these two departments, and, you know, speaks well to both our new chief's disposition towards the auditor's office, but also, Mark, your work in the role that you've held so well for all these years. And then I also noted that you, with this new, lots of new hiring, I also noted that you were anticipating you might have increased complaints around service or courtesy. And so I appreciate you thinking ahead to how will the makeup of our police department maybe shift what your office is going to see in terms of meeting the needs of the community. And then you spoke to the fact that your walk-in complaints have gone way up. You're spending more time reviewing the body-worn cameras, and yet you were able to put money back into the general fund. Are you thinking that you might have a need for additional staff to deal with increased workload?
I think we're just going to try really hard not to get to that point. I'm hopeful that, again, Chief Skinner's commitment to a more customer service guardian type model of policing will perhaps cause that shift to change. If there's more funding for more officers, again, a lot of complaints are about response times or not doing anything. I can't remember a time when we've had more business owners make complaints about the lack of police services, even on a few occasions where the perpetrator is literally right at the business stealing stuff, and they're right in front of the owners, and the owners are calling the police, and nothing happens as the people continue to steal the stuff right in front of them. And so, again, I'm hopeful that we get to a point where resources are equivalent to need. But certainly, I would say the single thing most people complain about is that service, lack of, calls for service. And I think Chief Skinner will be the first to admit that they also need to be more efficient as well. And so they don't need 4 officers when someone's just laying in a doorway. And an elderly person who's laying in a doorway, they don't need 4 officers. And so with the new sergeants especially is that mindset of, okay, we got to keep things moving and have a reasonable amount of people here, but not too many people here. So, and I know that he recognizes that too.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that you're addressing that with him and making recommendations. And then just quickly on the use of force numbers, you said there were 200 reported last year. Was that the same, more, fewer than years past?
That was approximately, it was the same level. I think there were like 192 the year before.
And then only 1% of the complaints were related to use of force. And was that the same, fewer, more, and were those internal, external?
That's a very good question. If we receive a complaint about use of force, I can't say whether they're all external or internal. If we review a use of force and we have a issue with it, that can be opened either under the auditor, or if the chain of command agrees that there's an issue with it, then that's an internal complaint. We don't receive typically a whole lot of complaints from the community about use of force anymore. We did, when I started. Yeah. And I do think it helps that sergeants are showing up to the scene, talking to the person and saying, hey, this is what, tell me what happened. This is why they did what they did.
And that was a relatively new protocol, maybe
About
3 years ago?
2013, actually, we started looking at. And I would say I'm probably the single number one complainer about use of force. Again, it's not very many, but if we see one and move it forward, I got a kick out of it's in here, the Police Chief magazine that I get. They're talking about the program in Arlington, Texas that just started in 2017, where they're starting to review uses of force and things like that. And they had about 1,000 for 300 and some contacts. And I don't know how many contacts EPD gets every year, 300,000 or more? Anything, any contact. Yeah, so it was just interesting how they're touting this program in Arlington that's brand new, and we've been doing this for 6 years now. And so, again, we've been really vigorous about doing those kinds of things, and we've had several cases that we did take a look at and brought forward allegations on. And but I think there again, it's officers. No, I don't think they have that mindset that it's okay to get in a confrontation, and if we can resolve a situation, I think the culture is changing where they take pride in problem solving as opposed to just arresting someone and taking them to jail because you only have 25 jail beds anyway. So again, I think it's a significant culture change, but I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. I think it's most difficult in the evenings with brand new sergeants and brand new officers, trying to learn everything very quickly. And Chief Skinner warned me that they were going to have a lot of new hires and that there's going to be an adjustment period. So I think we're in that adjustment period, I hope, right now in terms of the complaints and things.
I can run those numbers and get back to you.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Alan?
Yeah, excellent report. Once again, keep up the good work. The outreach is just really tremendous, the amount of stuff that we're doing. We've asked for that over the years, and I think you've delivered that in spades, Mark. So keep up the good work, and thank you for doing that. I did notice that you said we're going to come up with another record number of complaints. Being on the, having been involved with the police auditor and the CRB as the council president, but also being on the police commission, one thing I've noticed about the numbers that we have is that they tend to be a lot higher than every place else. And if you do a good job in your organization and promoting that as a place where you can go do that, and you have a reputation of doing a good job and being fair and unbiased, like, for instance, the number of internal complaints that come from within the police department is really high compared to other places. And I attribute that to your unbiased nature, so they feel like they can go there and get it resolved. But if you do a good job like that, you end up with higher numbers than other places. So, for instance, we just had a hate and bias crime report, hate and bias complaint report, and crimes. And last year, unfortunately, we had 74 in 2017, and that was the highest in the state. And we got a headline of being the highest in the state, more than any place else. It's kind of it was about 46, 47, and then it went up to 74, which I think was the Trump effect, and then it dropped down again to 47, so about average. But at the same time, the entire city of Portland had 19, and the University of Oregon had 1. And I think I attribute our higher numbers to the ability for people to do that, the comfort of people to be able to do that. So I caution people about just saying we have high numbers, not to minimize the hate and bias crimes and or the complaints that come to the place, but the ability to us to do a good job of collecting that data, being able to have access to it, and feel like they can do it, makes comparisons to other communities, like the entire city of Portland, which is what, 10 times the size of us, only gets 19 hate and bias crime reports. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I think it's actually a credit to the job we do. Unfortunately, we have a lot of these numbers, but comparing us to other cities and saying we're way off the mark, I think we need to be very cautious when we do that.
And that's a great point, and
Especially
we
the
say it in
470
terms
number,
of,
for instance.
we quantify it in the terms of the quantity, you know, that we're compared to other cities, like I think maybe Philadelphia a few years back got 73 complaints against the police. Well,
73 total.
you know, come on. So I think it's the confidence in the process. I would think that most employees of the Eugene Police Department think they are as highly scrutinized as any police employees in the nation. And the vast, you know, and they do a lot of very, very good work. But at the same time, we're a community that wants the balance and wants to ensure that the great powers and responsibilities that they have is measured and weighed versus the incidents that might occur. So, yeah, I quantify it more into the volume of work that we do as opposed to thinking that this is a bad police department compared to other cities.
Right.
The observation I would have, I always like looking through the cases because it gives me a sense of the, I guess, the degree to which certain areas compile. And I look at service level complaints and performance complaints, and it's interesting the number that actually overlap. You could say they could be either one. Yeah. And one of the things I look for, particularly in the large pie slices, are these serious complaints? Are they ones that a reasonable person would say, this is serious? And I look at a lot of the service level complaints, and you have hit the nail on the head. It's what we talked about in our whole community safety conversation is if it takes 9 hours to get to a call, that's not considered a good service level. And it's not the chief's fault or the police department's fault, it's the resource fault. And then I look at a lot of the performance complaints, and I see a lot of the same kinds of complaints. There's not enough. You didn't do enough. Now, there's some folks who say, well, you didn't arrest everybody, and I wanted you to. And the police are constrained by what the police are allowed to do. They can't do what people want them to do. But I didn't see in the performance complaints a lot of the serious kinds of complaints that I would look out for to say, is the police department not performing well? And so I think not enough complaints also get back to the same community safety conversation that, at least for me, was what helped compel me to feel that we needed to do something about it rather than just continuing to talk. So these numbers confirm for me how important it is that we have sufficient resources on the ground. And I expect once we get the community safety initiative up and running, these complaints should hopefully go down significantly as we begin to achieve some performance here. In terms of courtesy, that's also an interesting one because it is also a large pie slice, but it's interesting that a lot of the courtesy complaints are, well, you didn't treat me the way I think you should treat me. And that's a very subjective element because I know a lot of people hate government simply for the reason that we take their money and tell them what to do. And so anytime you tell somebody what to do, they're not going to like it. And so I think even at 15%, we're probably doing pretty well in terms of a department that by its very nature is forced to tell people what they can do, and that would naturally make people unhappy. So once again, I look for those kinds of courtesy complaints that look like they would be serious, and I don't see as many of them. So even though there's large numbers and even though the level is where it is, I'm not seeing the seriousness that would worry me that there was a real significant problem here. I think it's something that people are going to do, but hopefully the police department will develop, as you mentioned, the problem-solving skills that will be able to help to reduce these numbers.
And I think we do play an ombudsman role. And for folks, I think what you mentioned, I think even if there's not violence yet, so that there is a call for service and it might not be a priority one, because they get the priority one calls very quickly. It's that sort of fear of something bad's going to happen to me if they don't get here pretty soon. And I think that's usually the most passionate of the calls. So then when the officer does get there, the person is already in their fear factor. So they're not thinking with this part of the brain, it's more the back survival part of the brain. And so I think those are the ones that also sort of worry me the most, that the potential exists, an officer doesn't get there soon enough, and then something does happen. Those are the ones I probably worry about the most in terms of, okay, but then we look at how things are prioritized and what the other calls they're on at that particular time. And again, it's a very difficult situation when officers aren't there, aren't available.
Great. Are there any other questions? Wonderful. Really doing a great job. I mean, the auditor's department, along with the Civilian Review Board, is doing everything I could have ever hoped that they would do. And I think the council is very appreciative of the work that you do.
That means a lot. Thank you very much.
Well, unless there's something else to bring to the council, now we are adjourned.
All right.